All right. Check on the payment.
Hi, everyone. Just bear with us a little bit, if that's okay. We're just anticipating that we'll have a few more people come through. And we did promise people who showed up in person food, which hasn't come. So we'll try and work that out.
So did they run? Is it meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Was, so how do you go about it?
Do you have anything on Karen? No.
She's calling to check, but we just checked the catering order, but I think should arrive by 12.
Okay.
That's nice. Okay, all right.
As far as I know,
It's
they still have circulated.
First black policeman to arrest. Like,
So,
Okay, and then
it's like,
all of them is.
So how did that become?
so,
And we don't know why that is.
other than
So
that,
it's like-
apologist.
You know how in Divergent.
That was a little mean, but
But also.
it's just all about the same, the history,
Yeah.
kind of, military machine that then apologize to, as far as like, can I just ask everyone, has anyone seen a conference program yet? Not just me. Okay. We will have to talk a little bit about that, but I would anticipate it's coming very soon. It's incredibly late.
I was actually thought about it the other day, and I was like, this conference happening in exams.
Yeah. And, yeah, but we're hostage to them, right? We send them the papers, they accept the papers, that so far there isn't none. Yeah, sorry.
Mine's quite boring.
What, can I just have your attention, what I think I'm gonna do, at the moment, we're a smaller group than I had anticipated. And I'm kind of hoping that we will kind of become a bit larger, in the next kind of 5 or 10 minutes, but I've always felt like it's a bad idea to penalize people who actually showed up on time. So I want to start by giving everyone an opportunity to ask any questions they might have regarding how things proceeded so far. And just give me a sense of things that you might be anxious about or want to have covered in terms of how to take the papers that you've all written and turn them into presentations. So can I just get a kind of level check? How are we feeling about this? It's the wrong time of year, right? There's a lot going on. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Are there issues, and I would apply this to people online as well, that you're particularly anxious about that we can speak to? Or is it just a kind of general uncertainty about how things are going to be?
May I please ask a question?
Please.
Will we get feedback on our conference papers? Because I've spent a lot of time on my paper and I feel it's like this stunning project, but at the same time, I also fear I can be way off. So will somebody go through our papers and give us feedback to say completely off track or more or less there? Will we get some sort of feedback?
No, you will get feedback on your paper, but we've made a decision not to give you a large amount of information regarding revisions prior to the conference. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you advice on how to develop the paper you have in draft for presentation in the conference. And then what we anticipate taking place is that after you present at the conference, you'll incorporate whatever feedback and insights and questions that you would have arising out of that experience at the conference. And then we will provide feedback on the papers with a view to developing for publication. The conference itself is relatively close in terms of the calendar, and we don't necessarily think it's going to be productive for everyone to get a lot of feedback immediately prior to an event you're supposed to be presenting at, where we expect that that's likely to knock you off or leave you uncertain rather than in a more confident position. So the feedback will come on the paper, but the feedback will come on the paper after you present.
Okay, thank you.
Other things that have come up, issues you want to raise before we get it?
No, for me, it was just, I think we're all used to presenting, proposals.
Yeah.
And so just, how different is it going to be from that, or just giving us some tips on,
So that is the purpose of this presentation.
Okay.
What we want to do is firstly give you some structured, practical advice in terms of taking the paper that you've written and submitted and converting that into a format that works for a presentation at a conference. Now, there's two major kind of considerations here that I want to take you through. The first is that you cannot read your paper at the conference. It's too long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only too long by a little, it's too long in the sense that realistically speaking, you're going to be able to produce about a third of what you have on the page at the point of the presentation. Okay, so we're going to give you some advice and guidance regarding how you take how it looks like as a written paper and converts that into a shorter and distilled version for presentation. The second thing we're going to have to talk about is how to engage audiences around your presentation, because people often get nervous, particularly when they don't have a lot of experience on presenting, and you look at your paper you can kind of, some people will like hide behind it. Have you ever seen this? You kind of, people crouch down and the paper goes up and you kind of use it as a kind of shield. You want to get away from that because conferences are exhausting experiences. You use up a lot of your kind of emotional reserves, and by the final day, it's not uncommon for you to just kind of hate everyone. Like you're peopled out, right? Like you've seen the people, and the people are increasingly exhausting to you. And as a consequence of that, it's not uncommon for good papers to get missed or lost because you're not engaging with an audience in a way that kind of meets an audience that has already seen a lot of papers, will be thinking about other things, and so on. So you can have very good content and you won't necessarily communicate that content in terms of where the audience is at. So we're going to talk a little bit about both of those things. So my first slide here, and you might want to think about a slide such as this one if you're going to do slides, gives you a rough sense of the things I'm going to be talking about. So in presenting, you should start your presentation somewhere in the region of where I've kind of started. You want to set a scene, you want to contextualize what's going on, and you want to give people not a lot, but a little of a taste of what we're going to do and where we're going to go. Make sense? So an opening slide or an opening discussion that goes, here's my topic, here's the key features, and here's the rough sequence I intend to follow, is never a bad idea in terms of setting the scene. Now, you're at somewhat of a disadvantage in this context because the conference organizers have not yet circulated the conference program. And that is challenging on a couple of different levels. It's challenging firstly because you don't know what day you're supposed to go on. But secondly, and equally challenging, you don't know until you see the program how much time you have to present. Now, the number of other speakers on your panel determine how the time in a panel gets sliced. So if you're on a 3-person panel, you can anticipate that you have more time than a 4-person panel. So most sessions at a conference are generally 2 hours or 15 minutes short of 2 hours. So it's kind of 105 minutes, basically. And what normally happens is that you get roughly 15 minutes per presenter. So 4-person panel, 15, 15, 15, 15 will get you to an hour. And then if it's an hour and a half, you have a half hour for questions. If it's 2 hours, you would probably get 4 20-minute slots followed by questions. So when the conference program comes out, it will tell you 2 things. It will tell you what time you're on, but it will also give you a guidance as to how long you have to present. Now, it's never more than 20. 20 is the upper limit. And I can tell you that on occasions in tight and big conferences, it can sometimes be less than 10. So I once flew all the way to the United States for a conference and was told I had 7 minutes to present.
Great use of
And
carbon emissions.
not a great use of carbon emissions, but also what you're doing, at least in part, is using this as an opportunity to start a bunch of conversations and meet a bunch of people. So it's not necessarily simply just the formal proceedings that we're interested in at a conference. And you'll see, I'll talk about that at the end on number 5 while at the conference and give you a sense about the other things that are going on. So in terms of your time limit, I would expect you to plan for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. A fully packed program, you might get pushed down to 12. But realistically speaking, you should be anticipating that your presentation will be 15 to 20 minutes in this presentation. Now, you're going to have a chair, which is normally an experienced academic who is responsible for timekeeping. And that person can either be good or bad at their job. And what that means is that a good chair will send you a note that says 5 minutes, 1 minute, time is up. A bad chair will not pay attention to time and may let people speak over. And if you're the last person on the panel, you can be left in this quite awkward situation where everyone else has taken too much time and you're not in a position, you're in a position where your presentation is basically going to eat the time. Now, the advice here is that that is the chair's fault and not your fault. So you take the time that's allocated to you because that is the deal. So you have to deal with good or bad chairing, but if you've been told you have 15 minutes, you take that 15 minutes. Okay, so in terms of giving a paper, we want you to think in terms of 3 key characteristics. And you'll see there's a no pressure question, exclamation mark, question. We know there's pressure. We know that it's an anxiety producing experience and that you're going to be just of necessity anxious as part of this presentation process. Now, I can confidently say that the more you do this, the easier it gets. So you go over time, you get used to contexts, you have a better sense about what's expected, what's not expected. It does become familiar. But as someone who's been doing these for 20 odd years, you're still nervous on occasion. You're still anxious. And one of the reasons you're anxious is you know better than anyone else what the limitations of your own work are. So it's extremely common as you go into a conference presentation to go, shit, what if they ask about this? What if they ask about this? This is anxious, this doesn't work. What if I get a question on this obscure theorist that I've been meaning to read, but I haven't had time to, but I just put a cite in the paper and I don't really know what that person says. And like, what if someone asked me about that? 99.99% of the time, that anxiety you have running through your head prior to your presentation is completely unfounded. You get different questions. You get asked about things you haven't considered. Mm-hmm. So anxiety is healthy, but the people in the audience don't have an access to your inner mind where there's that one thing that you're really anxious about. I can promise you they don't know what that thing is. It's very occasionally they might get there and then you have to kind of deal with it. But the vast majority of the time, you're much more aware of the limitations of your paper than your audience are. And that anxiety you have going through your head is healthy, but don't be overly surprised when you get through your panel and you go, no one asked me about that. That is actually the most common scenario. No one asked me about that. Okay, so you should be anxious. Telling you not to be anxious is not productive or healthy. You're always going to have some of that. In lots of ways, it's not a bad thing because it motivates you to prep and do your work properly. But I can tell you that in a lot of cases, that deep, dark secret you're worried about as you go up to the podium is unlikely to come up. Okay, so we want you to do three things. We want you to communicate your arguments and evidence. We want you to persuade your audience, and you need to be interesting and entertaining. Now, at conferences, people usually are graded on a curve. So in a lot of cases, what we're really asking you to do is to not juggle 8 balls or swallow fire or otherwise be a kind of all singing, all dancing kind of performance artist. No one expects that of you. People should, but don't always in practice do, calibrate their response to your presentation based on your level of experience. So they're not going to expect you to the same standards of performance as they would for someone who's been doing this for 20 or 30 years. People should meet you where you are and not expect something different or distinct from what you can bring. At the same time, you want to be in a situation where you break through and say something that connects with your audience, because otherwise there's a chance that the eyes glaze over and you're not in a situation where you're really engaging your audience. Okay, so a couple of ways you can do this. The first way you can do this is to actually think a little bit more about space. You remember we said that people kind of hide behind their script and they read it and they try and engage around it. You have a podium. You will generally be asked to stand up. So you're physically able to move in a presentation. And if you know, as I move, you guys are now interacting with me in a different way than if I was standing and hiding. So part of it can be performance. I've seen people on occasion on the final day will start their presentation with some stretching or some yoga or just something to reset. So the first way you can engage your audience is to think about presence and space. If you're comfortable moving, if you're comfortable changing your position, you will be engaging in such a way. So who noticed as I walk up and go around? Did you start paying more attention as I did that or less? It's partly because I'm really big and scary and I'm sitting behind you. It is partly that. But you're in a situation where you understand this is kind of performance. And because I'm big and scary, I also tend to make lots of really terrible jokes because I want to cut against being big and scary. Does that make sense? So you find a way to kind of engage with your audience as performance. Does that make sense? Some of you will just go, I need to get through this fucking thing. I'm going to stick to my basics. I'm going to get through it. And that for me is all I can accomplish. And at this stage in your career, that is still a very significant accomplishment. But if you're comfortable or feeling like you need to interact, there's strategies you can do to kind of connect with your audience more substantially. The key thing, the most important thing is that you have a very short amount of time to get across a couple of big points. So here, you need to think about the difference between something being shallow, but covering a lot of territory, and something being deep in the sense that you're going into the details in a lot more level, in a lot way. So there's a difference between shallow, trying to cover lots and lots of things very quickly, and being deep in the sense that you're diving into one core thing or one key issue. Most conference papers are a combination of shallow and deep. They're shallow in that you quickly set the scene. Here's my topic, here's my people, here's my evidence, bang, 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 really quickly. And by doing the front end quickly, what you're trying to do is free up space on the back end of the presentation to engage in more depth with some of your evidence, some of your examples, some of your ideas. So what is your argument? A conference paper is never a murder mystery. We don't wait till the end to find out who did it, right? So on that first slide, in your first 5 minutes, you're like, this is the key position I want to take. This is the argument I am advancing. This is the position I want to defend and develop. You put it up right at the beginning. And then you spend the rest of your time available developing and defending with your evidence as much as you can the position you started with. That makes sense? Sorry, I saw two hands here. And online, if you could, I think there's an opportunity here if you want to come in as well to ask questions. So I have here and here.
So, I would have missed the positioning, so correct what? Yeah.
You're okay?
Yeah, and maybe I'm going in too much into the performance of the presentation. Because I'm thinking, would you not lose your audience if you just start by saying, this is my position?
But I'm not saying this is your position, because you can't just go, this is my position. My position is that, what's a bold position? My position is that the BRICS constitutes a counterweight to US hegemony, right? Very standard thing. I can't make that position without first explaining something about what BRICS is, what its context looks like, and on what basis I'm drawing this conclusion. So to take an example, hi everybody, my name's Joel. Today I'm going to be talking about the role of BRICS as a potential counterweight in the end of the unipolar movement, and thinking instead about what a Russian and Chinese counterweight to US hegemony might look like. As you know, BRICS has recently expanded to include these additional countries, and there's problems associated with this because it includes a bunch of countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia who deeply hate each other. I want to suggest, on the basis of an analysis of remarks by foreign leaders, foreign secretaries of these countries, that BRICS actually has a greater degree of cohesion than people might assume. And even if Iran and Saudi Arabia hate each other within a global political context, they are nonetheless supportive of the broader BRICS projects against US hegemony.
And then
Right.
go
So
into
that's,
the
yeah, but
evidences and the cases.
yes.
Oh, okay.
But you could see, what is my evidence? My evidence is I looked at foreign secretary, diplomat speeches. I set the scene by talking about the expansion of BRICS.
Yes.
I set it up against US hegemony, so we understand the point of departure away from what I'm talking about. And I basically said, even if these people hate each other, they're still likely to be aligned with the BRICS project more broadly. So that was maybe 90 seconds. And this is BRICS. It's important. These are the recent developments. These are my evidence. This is my argument. Make sense? So that's super shallow. It's fast. It's bang, 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 bang. If I just said BRICS will fight the US successfully, That's not gonna work. Right? So in setting the scene, I'm introducing the topic, I'm defining recent events, I'm saying what my evidence base is, and then I'm giving you the argument. So if any of you have field work, sources of evidence, archives, focus groups, interviews, any sources of original evidence, you should make clear what your sources of evidence are in the first 90 seconds of your presentation. Make sense? And this is particularly for anthropologists. Anthropologists get together and get drunk and talk about all the places they nearly died of exotic diseases because you gain credibility in anthropology by doing fieldwork. You gain credibility in anthropology by talking to people on an extended basis. So they're interested in your sources of evidence. I did this many interviews. I did this many observations. I ran these focus groups. I combined these archives with this analysis of media. You know, I ran a play. I engaged with television. So you set up and make explicit what your topic is, what makes it important, where your sources of evidence are, and what argument you seek to develop in the rest of the paper. So you're putting a lot of information up at the beginning of the paper. Make sense? And then you're spending probably 2/3 of your presentation diving into one case, diving into one example, diving into something that helps you to demonstrate or illustrate the initial position that you started with. Does that make sense? So the beginning is fast, it's quick, it's shallow, it sets the scene, bang, 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 bang. Most of your presentation is, here's the deep dive I can manage in the time available, which demonstrates my point. And then on the back end, you come out of the case and you hint at implications, arguments, things that we can draw or learn from the evidence that you marshaled or put together. So the what is your argument is what is the top line? The top line that you want people to walk away from having listened to your 15-minute presentation. Make sense? So you need to be thinking not about there's a million things I think are relevant. There's a sociological article, it's no one ever remembers it other than its title. Its title is Fuck Nuance. You can look it up. It is literally the title of an academic paper is Fuck Nuance. And it's not a particularly great article, but it's a useful injunction to guard against the temptation to just add layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of complexity. So you want to have a top line, you want to have one or two things that you want to put up in lights as the most important points you want to get across. And you want to do that early, and you want to foreground that at the heart of your presentation. Make sense? Can I just ask, are there any questions online?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes. Sorry, I can't see who you are because of how this is configured. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, given that we have only 15 minutes, roughly 15 minutes to present, are we expected to have PowerPoint slides while presenting?
Okay, I have a slide that says PowerPoint slides coming.
Oh, okay.
So I'll talk you through that in a little bit, if that's okay. I will definitely get to PowerPoint. The short version is that you can do it, but you don't have to be honest. And we'll talk a little bit about how you do it, because one of the problems that people often have with PowerPoint is that they do a shit job with PowerPoint, and shit PowerPoint is worse than no PowerPoint, to be honest. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute.
Okay.
Like I had a question.
Rebecca?
Hi, Joel. Thank you. I have a not content related question yet, but logistical.
Yep.
And do we have any sense yet about when you might receive the conference program?
Yeah,
Or
Rebecca, I started with that. We still don't have it. And
right. No, I know. So I was asking, do you know when you might get it from the conference organizers? So that
I
like
will
on
I would anticipate that I will get it at the same time everyone else gets it.
Gotcha.
The key conference organizer is a woman named Helen McDonald at UCT. And she and I have had a few back and forths, and we did manage to sort out a few things, but I've never seen a program. And I'm in the same position because I submitted a paper of my own for the conference, and I don't know when it is going to be on either. So we're just going to have to wait.
Thank you.
It's got to be this week. Like, people have to plan logistics, they have to plan travel. So, you know, this has got to be soon. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of, you know, finish this session and go home and there's an email that says it. It should be coming now. It's incredibly late, to be honest. Anyway, we'll deal with that when we can. Okay, in terms of from paper to presentation, there's a couple of points I want to make. The first is you can roughly speak 150 words a minute. Now, some of you might be a little bit quicker than that. So you can speak 175 maybe. What that means for a 10-minute presentation is that you have 1,500 words. If you're at 175, you have 1,750 words. Now, you may be tempted to try and set a record for speed talking, because then you can otherwise get as much content as you can as quickly as possible, and therefore it will be excellent to communicate everything you've ever thought in your life, and it's not working, right? Because all of a sudden you're now thinking, this person's speaking way too fast. I can't follow this, I can't catch it. So you have to deal with the hard logistical fact that 1,500 words for 10 minutes, I'm using 10 because at 15 minutes, it's about like 2,200 words or thereabouts. So it's slightly more than 2,000 words for a 15-minute presentation. And you can't cheat the goal of the presentation and go, I'm going to do 3,000. I'm going to make it a speed run. Because if you make it a speed run, you've got all the words out. People can't follow them because you're just speaking really fast and to yourself and not to anyone else. Make sense? So you have two ways of planning your conference presentation. The first way of planning it is to take your conference paper and start deleting bits and adding conjunctions that cover material that you've deleted. into a script that goes from 5, 6, 7,000 words to roughly 2,000 words. Now, you can't just simply delete whole paragraphs and just present what's left. There's going to be sections of your paper where there's material that's covered in 3 paragraphs, and you want to condense that down to 1 paragraph that captures the key points in the 3. Does that make sense? So say there's 3 paragraphs, you can't go, I'm going to delete paragraph 1 and 3 and keep 2, because you need stuff that's in 1 and 3. And what you really need to do is take 1, 2, and 3, which are 400 words, let's say, and condense the argument that you make in those 3 into 1 paragraph of about 180. So you're not simply just pruning off stuff to get the word count down. You're reworking what you've already written in such a way that you're capturing and condensing the key points you want to make. Now, you particularly do this with the lit review section. So you'll recall when we talked about a conference paper, there's a rough guideline of 1/3 literature, 2/3 evidence, and your literature's at the front end. And one of the mistakes people make is that they write papers that end up being entirely literature review and no evidence. What you want to do is condense that initial lit review section down into a small number of key ideas. So if your lit review section has discussions of 10 authors, just for the sake of a round number, you might find that you want to pick 2 or 3 and drop the rest of them and use them to set the scene faster and quicker. Make sense? So that's the way you do it. You take your paper and you condense it down to a script that you then intend to read. Now, this has the advantage of dealing with any anxiety you might have while you're presenting. You've got something you can read, right? And if you get nervous, you can just go, I know how to read. I've been doing that shit for a while. I'm just going to read through the script. Now, the danger you have with that is that you decide to read in a monotone voice where all the words have the same emphasis and nothing stands out as distinctive or valuable. So if you start with a script, I would strongly suggest that you start adding notes to yourself within that script. Now, a good note in all caps is slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down. And if you're worried that you're going to get nervous and you're going to speak too fast, you can, and I did this as a PhD student, literally have an all caps slow down after every single paragraph in my script. So you're reading it, you're going, slow down, yes, slow down, yes. Like you're basically breaking yourself. You're basically going, I'm nervous, so I'm going to speak really fast. The other thing you should be doing is thinking about varying of pace and varying of emphasis. So if you have a script, you should have a couple of sections where the material is bolded. And if you're worried about it, you might put before the bolded material in all caps again, pause, stop. look up. Because if you're reading in a single pace, so you're speed reading, no one knows when the really important bits come. So if you have in your script, pause, bold, look up, that gives you a set of instructions that this is the bit you really want to communicate. Make sense? Yeah.
So like a scripted dialogue can actually.
You can. I mean, if you're anxious about this and you're not a natural performer, I did this for a couple of years. And on the big occasions where I've had to give big presentations, I'm still presenting them in front of the mirror to make sure I've got the time right. So if you're anxious about this, you prepare a lot. You get a script, you give yourself prompts on your script, you read through that script on multiple occasions, you think about how the logic and the rest of it connects. Because you can't condense, you can't give your paper, you just don't have time. So you're going to have to make decisions. If you have multiple case studies, you might just cut all but one completely and go into detail. That doesn't mean that you go, I'm comparing Zimbabwe with Zambia, and I'm just going to do Zambia. That probably doesn't work. But if you're doing Zimbabwe as Zambia and you've got a case of electoral commissions, political party funding, control of the media, you probably can't do those three thematics. So you pick one, you say at the presentation, I've done three, I can talk about the other two, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to do one. You can't be only shallow. You can't be only shallow. You've got to go, here's the core of my evidence where I'm going to stop and I'm going to pause and I'm going to go into a lot of detail regarding one thing. And it's better to spend time on that one thing than to try and cover 3 or 4 things quickly, because you'll just end up being superficial and lost. Nicole, would you come in here? I get the sense you've thought about this, where you have the prompts. What other prompts would you recommend?
So the prompts that I always do in my own presentations is like where to switch slides.
Yep.
Like that one for me is super important. And I think that like giving yourself notes about like mention this, but don't spend any time on it is really useful. And also the slow down, like relax, everything's fine. I think that's really good. But I do think the main thing here is just to practice your presentation a bunch of times, and especially like in front of an audience. Because the key thing to think about is also that it's one thing when you're just like reading your presentation out to yourself in front of your computer, because you'll speak much faster than when you're actually like speaking it to an audience. So always making sure you practice in front of an audience, I think is really helpful, because it means you speak slower and you have a better sense of how much you can actually get through realistically.
I think that's right. I also think that you may find people will often do a combination of script and ad-lib. So there's a version of this where you kind of set up a couple of paragraphs of text, and then you have a prompt that slide here, and the slide might be a map or some data or something that kind of highlights some of your findings. A lot of the time where you've got a data heavy slide, it doesn't make a lot of sense to read off the script. So you'll have a script that covers up to here, and then in your script, you might have a dot points that go, these are the dot points you want covered. And then you come back to the script. So you can have half a prepared thing you're going to read, and then at moments in the presentation, you're going to riff. Make sense? You're going to riff off the slides, you're going to riff off points, Now, when you start riffing, you get less ninja hand stuff a lot. Who's paying attention to weird hands? If you're shifting around, looking at people, engaging, moving, people are more likely to be paying attention to you. It's exceptionally easy to tune out someone who's just reading. So even if you are reading, you've got to stop, you've got to look, you've got to engage, you've got to connect. So all of those, yeah, in, out, changes in pitch, changes in pace, changes in emphasis, all of which help to engage. All right, so let's go back to the paper to presentation. You cannot say everything you want to say. Aim for 2,200 words, or roughly. You can get up to about 175 words a minute without kind of breaking too much stride, but you've got to know how you engage. Some people talk faster than others. If you're someone who needs to take your time, don't overload your presentation. Put your argument up front, give us a top line, pay your respects to the literature, to the existing work in the field. So, you know, here I am building upon the arguments of author X, author Y, author K, author Z. They want an indication that you've thought about what other people have said on this topic, but you're doing it very quickly. Like sometimes people will put up a slide on the literature and it'll literally say the literature. It'll have 4 dot points. It will have names in brackets with key works after the dot points. And if the people know what they're doing, they're not going to reference all those people. They're just literally putting a slide up saying, here's the people. Here's a couple of ideas. We're moving on. So pay your respects. You know, recognize the ancestors, recognize that you're not only on an island, because when you present as if you're the only person who's ever thought about this before, people who've also thought about it tend to get annoyed. And in a conference such as this, you can reasonably anticipate that some of the people in the audience are there because they have expertise and interest in your topic. And if they have expertise and interest in their topic, they're going to come with a sense of what they think the literature. So you pay your respects to the literature. That doesn't mean that you cite all the people they think should be cited, but you at least want to be in a situation where you demonstrate you're part of an academic conversation, but you're doing it quickly.
Yeah. And maybe it answers why some people will make reference to your abstract while you're presenting. Is it just to check if you're online?
See, I don't really get that, to be honest. People will look at your abstract because they're busy from the conference and they were toying between 2 panels they were going to. And they decided to pick one, but they don't remember what's all of the stuff that's on the panel is. So they're quietly looking at the information on the panel because they weren't quite sure which panel they're in, if that makes sense. So that the abstracts will often be kind of markers where people are trying to orient themselves in a conference. And to be clear, like we haven't seen the program yet, but if you've ever seen a big conference program, there's going to be 20, 30, maybe 30 parallel sessions. So there's going to be a whole bunch of people presenting in different rooms simultaneously. You are not the only people presenting in your slot. And as a consequence, people will be torn as to, do I go to this one? Do I go to that one? And if they decide to go to your one, they may not be quite sure exactly what's going on. So they're looking at the abstracts to orient.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So pay your respects. Don't present yourself as a person on an island who is the first person to ever do this, but do not spend huge amounts of time on it. You pay your respects quickly and early, you move on. And what you're trying to do is to set the stage as quickly as you possibly can in the first third or 40% of the presentation. So you freed up time on the back end that you can do one deep dive into your evidence. So if you can, I would say roughly try and get at least 50 and maybe 60% of your presentation being what you found, what your evidence is, what your interview people said, what the focus groups came up with. Half of it at a minimum should be, here's what I found, here's what I did. Make sense? Now you're still selectively diving. You're picking one case. You're picking some quotes. You're picking an example from an archive, but not all the archives you looked at. You're kind of picking one component out of the case for your evidence, and you're using it as a window case, an example, an exemplar of the larger work that you found. Make sense? So you will do better spending more time on one specific thing than trying to cover all of the things quickly and in general. You've got to dive, you've got to deep. And here you briefly mentioned things you've left out. Anyone ever seen this line? In the broader paper, I go into this in a lot more detail. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to focus on this. People can ask you about your paper. You can answer questions on your presentation with reference to your paper. So your paper is still kind of sitting there off stage. You can go, oh, I dealt with that in more detail in the paper, but I wasn't able to get to it here. And you love a question like that because it gives you more time to talk about the shit you couldn't get into the 15 minutes that was allocated initially. Make sense? So the most generous question anyone in the audience can ask you is, can you please elaborate a little bit more on X? And then you go, well, haha, I have a lot on X in my paper, but I had to cut it because you don't even really need to apologize. Everyone at a conference has gone through this process. They know there's things in the paper that can't get into the presentation. So you briefly mention other parts, but you don't dwell on it, you just move on. Make sense? Questions here from online people? Anything that comes in? Okay.
Stop and grab some food.
Yes, okay, so can we just do a 5-minute break? We'll come back at 1:07. Okay? Just to kind of have a break, and I'll talk you through presentation PowerPoints, and we'll say a bit more about how you do the conference and how you navigate those spaces. Is that okay? So quick 5 minutes, that's right. You want to get some food? muted. Those of you who are online, I think we'll probably get started again after a quick break. All right, so you can't say everything. We set up the presentation. There's two more things I want to cover about the presentation, just to give you a sense of how it works. The first is how the panel will be organized. If you're the first or second speaker, 90% of the time you will present and someone else will start presenting with no questions to you. So it's normal practice to hold all the questions until all speakers have finished presenting. So what that means is that you finish presenting and it can be very anticlimactic. You just kind of like, oh, and our next person is, and you're just kind of sitting there going, This gets a little tricky because if you're nervous, you're probably not paying attention to what anyone else is saying. And it's not completely uncommon for when the questions to come back up that someone will ask the same question to multiple presenters. So I would encourage you to vaguely get a sense about what other people on the panel are saying, even though realistically speaking, you're not paying full attention. You're waiting for your time to present, or if you have presented, you're sitting there relaxing and decompressing while the questions come. Occasionally, and this is when chairs get slightly stupid, they will try and pause the proceedings to ask questions about each paper as they go. This is a very, very stupid idea because it inevitably means that the people who present last get no time. So in an ideal universe, you want everyone to present, and then you want to be in a situations where questions are being asked of the panel in its entirety. Now, I want to talk you through some of the dynamics of questions answering and just give you a sense of how to think about questions. The first point is not all questions are good ones. Just because someone has a PhD and a job at a university doesn't mean they're not self-aggrandizing assholes. And also doesn't mean that they will stay on topic. So you have to be prepared for some presenters to give mini speeches, and those mini speeches to not really be related to your actual presentation. So one of the things that you should be doing is you should be taking notes, have a pen, have a paper, type on your computer, whatever you're most comfortable with. But at the end of the questions, you are allowed to go, I'm not sure I fully understood the question. Or you're allowed to go, there's a lot in your question, and I'm not sure that I can answer everything, but let me perhaps address this one thing. Right? So you have the option of parrying and repurposing and repositioning questions. There's no law that says you have to answer all the questions in the exact way they were phrased, because some of them are just going to be miles off topic and they're going to be hard to get your head around. You're also allowed to go, I'm sorry, I don't think I understand the question. Could you maybe clarify? So understand your position as someone who's being asked questions as a dynamic one where you can repurpose the question, pick bits of the question you want to answer, ignore bits of the question you don't want to answer, and so on. You also have And I encourage you not to do this. The response that goes, that's a really good point. I'm not sure that I fully considered this, so I'm just going to have to go away and give that some reflection and get back to you or don't get back to you. No one expects you to get back to them. You're basically just, you're killing the question, right? You're saying, thank you very much for your intervention. I don't have a good answer right now, so I'm not going to answer. I'm going to think about it. I need to go and do more research. Now, you always have that option available to you. I would encourage you not to do it all the time. Firstly, questions reveal things about your project that can be useful for revisions. And secondly, you want engagement with the audience. You want to have conversations about your work. And if you kill the question cold, you kill that conversation. So I would very valve and go, I'll need to go think about that later. You also have the option, and I would encourage you to do this if you feel confident, you can go and talk to people after the panel and go, let's talk about this. You share more of your ideas, your thoughts, your so on. If they like your paper and they're interested, they might come up and talk to you. So treat the questions not as gladiatorial combat where you have to slay all the questions and come out kind of triumphant at the end. Treat them as an opening to a conversation where even if you can't answer everything, you try and answer something and you start a conversation, and then hopefully someone wants to talk to you after. Does that make sense? So you've got to kind of talk your way through issues rather than kind of trying to slay all comers. Because you're going to be really anxious about questions, except the worst possible thing that can happen is you get no questions. And that happens not all the time, but enough of the time that anyone who's given a conference paper, you know, may say you give kind of 25 of these, probably one of the 25 you get no questions. Nicole, you've been on a paper, no questions.
I'm sure that's true, yes.
Happened to me. Gave a paper, no one asked me questions.
It also depends on the other papers on the panel, right?
Yes.
So it isn't necessarily that people don't care about your research, but maybe someone was so controversial and
Yes.
said something so wild. And at the end, that's all that's stuck in people's heads. And the entire 30 minutes is just taken up by like debating that person's ideas or trying to push back against their clearly insane research.
You can also be orphaned. Now, I tried really hard to put everyone in panels that were thematically well aligned. Some of the panels work really well. You see your name next to other papers and you're like, I understand what you were doing with that panel. There's a couple towards the end where I'm just like, shit, everyone needs a home. And I'm trying my absolute best, but at a certain point, sometimes you end up on a panel where everything's thematically coherent, and sometimes you're in a panel where it didn't quite come together, or the other papers cohere and you're an orphan that is slightly different and distinct to what the other papers are doing. Now, none of that is anything you can control, and I promise you conference organizers try their best to prevent it from happening, but they can't always land the plane. At which point, if you get no questions, it's probably because of the thematic disconnect between what the rest of the panel was on and what you were doing in your individual paper. So you have to kind of try and not take it personally. But that's unbelievably difficult to do because we all take it personally.
I think it happened to me, when I presented, but my letter was able to come, I think the following day and give me a reflection. So I think I had a certain expectation. There was someone who raised the question, but I expected it from my superiors, but they were able to. So perhaps one must deal with expecting certain things from certain people and overlooking other things that happens within the environment.
A lot of it is just outside your control.
Yeah.
A lot of it is, it's nothing to do with you. And you just have to go, it's not personal,
Yeah.
but it always feels personal and you can't get around that.
And also sometimes you just don't have a very big audience.
Mm.
I've traveled 2 hours to give a paper before and only 3 people showed up. And then there's only so long you can talk to those 3 people.
And if you're on the final day last session, a bunch of people already at the airport.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's nothing that can be done about that. So a lot of it's outside your control. What you want to do is you want to be in a situation where the paper triggers a conversation that you find interesting and useful. That's what it's for. It's there as an opening gambit to start some conversations, and hopefully those conversations are useful.
Even
Okay.
if not just with the people on the panel, right?
Yes.
Like
And-
the audience, great, but also the people on the panel, given that the panels are mostly thematic. I'm
Okay,
gonna,
yeah.
yeah.
So on PowerPoint, there are 2 cardinal rules. Have a small number of slides and do not overload your slide. Sorry, just give me a sec. Okay, can I just confirm that we're back? Because I lost the connection for maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. All right, so on PowerPoint, 2 cardinal rules, small number of slides, do not overload your slides. So for a 15-minute presentation, what's a good number of slides? 15?
4.
1 minute per slide? Anyone online want to guess?
I think
Cool.
it depends, some of them.
2. 2, we're going low.
I think some of
Maybe
them.
5.
Yeah.
3 minutes.
So there's no exact rule, but 15 is too many. 15 is way too many. So I would be comfortable personally for a 15-minute presentation to have 5 slides. With maybe a 6th slide that says thank you. I would have maybe 4 slides. You should not be clicking through slides really quickly. So on PowerPoint, smaller is always better. Then you should be doubling up the images on slides. Like, like if you're doing 1 image per slide, like do a 4x4, like a 2x2 and have 1, 2, 3, 4 images. Because you don't want to be speed clicking through slides. People can't follow them. And it's generally a sign that you've tried to put everything in your paper and your presentation up on the slides. And the purpose of slides is to condense what's already been condensed. So we're going to basically have you have a conference paper that's 7,000-8,000 words. You condense that to 2,000 word presentation. You then take that 2,000 word presentation and condense it again into a very small number of key points that come on the slides. So I would have 4 or 5 for a 15-minute presentation. If you have 20, I would probably still have 4 or 5, or maybe 6. So you don't want a huge number of slides. You also do not want your slides to become a wall of text. So if you're going to use dot points on your slides, have no more than 5 dot points per slide. And if you have 5 dot points that each constitute paragraph level text, you're doing it wrong. Okay? You don't put huge amounts of text up on PowerPoint. Images and graphics are preferable. Slides should be visually capturing attention. A wall of text is a problem because people start reading the text and not paying attention to what you're saying, or they're halfway in, halfway out between presentation and slides. So think about this slide. 3 points. I took each of those points and developed them in the presentation, right? Think about this slide. We did 5 things, right? So at no point, this one's got a bit more in it, but all of these are designed to have a small number of key points and not to put up on screen everything I'm trying to say in the presentation. So do not overload your slides. Have a limited amount of text. Try to avoid fancy washes, complicated background, anything neon, anything flashing. You don't get extra points by being fancy. This is not film school. It just needs to be straight and to the point. And PowerPoint is for punchlines and highlights, not for exposition. If you're going to use a couple of key respondent interviews, it's often quite good to put 1 or 2 quotes up from the people you talk to, or to put 1 or 2 examples from an archive or from the text, a few stills or pictures or posters. That is what PowerPoint is for. PowerPoint is for creating a highlight package, not for providing additional exposition for your presentation. Now, remember we said that you should have a script. If you do PowerPoint, you put in where in the script you flip your slides. But if you have PowerPoint, it may be that if you're feeling confident, you don't have a script. You have slide 1, a bunch of bullet points that you want to cover. Slide 2, bullet points. Slide 3, bullet points. And then you talk your way through your presentation rather than reading a script that you prepared earlier. So one of the things that PowerPoint does is it enables you to freelance a little bit more. Because when I click to the next slide, I am reorienting myself back on the path I prepared earlier, because the sequencing of the presentation is tied to the clicking through of the slides. So PowerPoint enables you to freelance a bit more than you otherwise would. Make sense? Okay. So that's it. I had a question about PowerPoint earlier. Have we addressed that, or are there issues that haven't yet been covered?
No, all has been addressed, and I understand what you've
Okay.
explained now.
Are there any other questions on PowerPoint? Any other issues? Tobacco, is that an old hand?
Ah, yes, sorry, that's an old hand.
No worries. Okay, so they're the main things about the presentation. While at the conference, I just have a few remarks to kind of make about the conference. A lot of what happens at conferences is part work, part play. And you will find that the conference will generally work better if you're engaging with people around lunches, after panels, at drinks before the conference dinner, and so on. This is not something that everyone is good at or comfortable with. So you've got to kind of know your own, you've got to have a sense. Sorry, can you please mute your mic? You've got to have a sense of what your comfort level is. But if you want to talk to someone at a conference, you should ask them a question when they present. Right? It doesn't have to be the world's greatest question. It's just put your hand up, get on the list, ask a question. That question then becomes the basis for a conversation after the panel. That may result in coffee or something else, or some kind of conversations or collaborations or whatever. What you really want to do is to just initiate conversations, because you'll see academics behaving quite differently to how they do it normal university settings. There's a different rhythm, there's a different set of connections. So you really want to be in a situation where you're trying out conversations, ideas, things about your work, things about others' work that you don't otherwise have an opportunity to get. So it's very easy to start conversations at conferences. Anyone know how to start a conversation at a conference? Yeah. Have you presented? What are you presenting on? Did it go well?
Which panel are you on?
Which panel are you on? So like you have a paper at a conference, other people have papers at a conference, you literally have the easiest entry point imaginable. Have you presented yet? How'd it go? What's it on? Have you been before? So there's just a series of quite simple, how's it going? What are you doing? What's your paper on? Questions that give you entry points to just start conversations with people.
I think a high level of awareness is required because conversation can start in different spaces within a conference.
Yeah.
Coffee, smoking area.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. But I think I like the idea of it's a conference situation of raising your hands and engaging the person while they are working there, you know, and let it flow. And because I think sometimes there's a bit of awkwardness when people feel attacked or they feel, you know, their space has been. So there must be a way of contextualizing it to the conference. Yeah.
I need to let you know that it doesn't always go well when you start conversations. And I remember when I was still a graduate student, like a PhD student, I went to a conference in Chicago, and I was talking to some people, and someone came up and wanted to talk to the person I was talking to, introduced themselves to the person I was talking to, looked at my name tag and age, decided I wasn't worth talking to, and then physically pushed me out of the conversation so this person could talk to the person who they thought was more important and I wasn't more important. Now, that's exceptionally rare, but like that was like 15 years ago, and I still remember that. I know who that person was. I'm going to think they're an asshole until the day they die. And I got some satisfaction years later. That person gave me an award for a best article prize, and I still remembered that person's name because back in the day, you learn who people are, not how they treat their superiors or the people they regard peers. You learn who they are by who they treat people who they don't think are the same as them. Don't be those people. You have to engage openly and honestly with everyone. Some people are more interesting to talk to than others. Some people are going to align better with what you do. All of that is fine. But occasionally you're going to encounter assholes. And it's not about what you did, it's about who they are. And again, you're still going to struggle to take it personally. But just because they're assholes doesn't mean you shouldn't try again with someone else. Okay? I hope you don't have those experiences, but I can tell you if you do, you definitely remember them. Any other questions? Online? In person?
Oh, I have another question.
Yeah.
Are we gonna have mics? Are we gonna use mics when talking?
No, probably not.
Oh.
On the plenaries, you might find that people are mic'd up, but for a general parallel session, you're generally not mic'd. If you are mic'd, you have to like basically remember there is a microphone and you're holding it, because if you move it back and forth, the audio pitch goes completely to shit. But I would not expect presenters to be mic'd. You might find that there's mics given out to the audience to ask questions in some of the bigger panels. So you might, if you have a podium mic, that's fine. It just should be on. The only thing with a podium mic is you can't wander around the room because you move outside the pickup of the mic and the thing drops. But I would generally spend 0% of your time worrying about this. There are other things that you're going to spend more time worrying about.
Yeah, because if we're not mic, then that would mean, projecting your voice, right? The people at the back should hear what you're saying. That's why I was asking.
They will generally tell you if they can't hear.
Oh, okay. And as far as attire is concerned, how do we show up?
So it's an anthropology conference and not an economics conference. So I think I would not expect anyone to be wearing ties, but it might be nice with like a shirt with a collar. And for women, I just think it's probably kind of casual, kind of professional, not like, run-of-the-mill clothes, but you don't need to be highly performatively dressed, would be my general kind of sense of this. But then again, like everyone has their different level. Some people are really comfortable in professional kind of get up and they like to dress up. I hate ties and haven't worn one for kind of 10 years. So that probably tells you about my kind of general disposition. But it's generally smart, casual, not formal, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Any other questions?
What's the correct protocol to show up? So do we have a stick with a presentation on there? And do we come prepared with that?
So they should, but given how poorly this has been organized, you can't be 100% confident that they will. They should have in your conference pack, when you show up to register, they'll give you a tote bag with like a bunch of stuff from the program in the bag. In that bag, they should have a list of all the presenters, what university they're from, and what their email addresses are. So what normally happens is if you talk to someone and you want to get hold of them, you can just use that list of delegate presenters to get hold of them. People have really moved off business cards. So kind of 15 years ago, everyone would play this dance and they'd hand out cards, and it's now got to the point where like very, very few people have cards. No one knows what to do with them. They're more like, you know, there's an internet, you can find me. So you can email someone your paper if they expressed an interest. Or you can ask someone for their paper. If you thought the paper was good, you just kind of, people love it when that happens. You just kind of put in the line, your paper from the conference, dear blah, 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 following on from our conversation, I'd really appreciate it if you would send over your paper. Now, that might start a conversation, it might not. Most of the time it doesn't. But asking people for their paper or sharing your paper is fine. On a memory stick, no one's going to open up a laptop and plug it in or anything like that. It's going to be an email. Laptops don't even have USB ports anymore. So you're most likely to email your paper. Yeah.
In terms of our presentations, do we have to bring our own laptops, or they're going to be paper and we send our presentations in the
I would anticipate, but again, they should have sent the program through. I would anticipate that there will be a laptop or something similar set up in each of the rooms, so you won't have to bring your own. What you generally have to do is email your PowerPoint slides onto an email address that is connected to the laptop that the PowerPoint's running on. You don't wait until you're presenting to do that. There's nothing worse than sitting around like waiting for someone to sort this shit out with PowerPoint. It eats into time, and every single person in the audience is sitting there going, why didn't you do this earlier? So for your presentation, I would very strongly suggest you show up earlier. You should hopefully find the chair, and the chair can help to organize and load the papers. You introduce yourself to the chair, but occasionally chairs are coming from some other panel, so they arrive late. There'll be a tech person or someone there to help you get your PowerPoint from your computer onto the one that's being used for presentations. You can't show up, disconnect that computer and plug your computer in so you have PowerPoint.
Yeah.
You're using the central computer, because if you're plugging in your laptop, what are the other people who are presenting doing? It works for you, it doesn't work for everyone else. So unless you're asked to do it that way, which is not completely unheard of because conference PowerPoints screw up all the time, And then people are like, has anyone got a Mac connector or, you know, some kind of random shit? If you're kind of stuck with that, then it's all hands and you can do what you want. But the protocol is to load your PowerPoint on the communal computer and test that your PowerPoint is clicking through before the panel has started. Anything else to anyone online? Are we good? Okay. Good luck to everyone, and I hope it goes really well.
Will we have the, oh, you, oh, we are.
Sorry?
Postmortem after the.
We will, so in terms of next steps, just to confirm with you, once you've presented, we will do a debrief session where we talk through how the conference went, give you a chance to kind of compare notes. And at that stage, we will talk you through how you convert your conference paper and your conference feedback into a draft article for publication. Okay, good luck to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
You're sharing quite a few.
Sorry?
I'm saying you're going to share quite a few positions.
It's fine, they're not on my work.
Yo. Yeah. So you'll just be running up and down. Oh, are they all on different days, the pennies?
I'm not sharing all of them.
Oh.
I allocated, I'm sharing 2, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not sharing all of them. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Good luck with it. We'll do it. We'll do it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You know.